Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Dr. Timothy Eberlein with me. How you doing today?
Real good.
Thanks for coming over. It's kind of nice. I can look at you, and just over your left shoulder, I can basically see the Siteman Cancer Center right over there, which is awesome. Lovely addition.
That's always a good thing.
It's a great addition to the Metro East. We're very happy you guys chose to do that. You are the director of the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, the former head of surgery, and a professor. You guys just celebrated 25 years of Siteman this past November.
Correct.
Congratulations to that. A lot of great stuff going, but like I do on every podcast, Dr. Eberlein, you were one of the very first people. I think you were probably in the first 10 I had. I didn't know what I was doing. Still don't know what I'm doing, but we sat in your office.
Okay, I don't know what I'm doing either, so
That's great. Two guys that don't know what we're doing.
But I surround myself with people who do.
Amen to that. I do as well. But tell us a little bit about yourself. What has helped make you the man that you are today?
Well, I don't know. I grew up humbly on the other side of the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had no formal education beyond high school, but they instilled in me a sort of work ethic and honesty and integrity. And I think that's what carried me through my life, throughout all the twists and turns.
Yeah. What did they do for a living?
My father was the foreman in a glass factory about 35 miles from our home, and my mother was the secretary of our local church.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think made you go to the level that you went with your education?
Well, I grew up in western Pennsylvania, and during my early years was when Alcoa Aluminum, they made pots and pans, the aluminum, copper bottom, black handles. That was made in New Kensington, and that plant closed, and there were thousands of jobs lost.
Wow.
To me, it was overnight. I was probably in junior high school at the time. But that was the premonition for all of the steel mills closing, and so.
Which is what made those towns out there, right?
Absolutely, and as I went on in education, it was obvious that Western Pennsylvania was in an economic freefall. But I ended up going to the University of Pittsburgh undergraduate on scholarships, and then to the University of Pittsburgh Medical School. I had the last free ride scholarship.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal.
I paid nothing to go to medical school.
That certainly helps.
Certainly for somebody of my background.
Yeah.
I would have never been able to go to medical school.
That's incredible. What inspired you to dedicate your career to oncology and specifically Siteman Cancer Center?
Well, it's interesting, again, because of the economics in western Pennsylvania. I had to get jobs in the summertime, so I worked at construction. I moved furniture, et cetera, et cetera. In between my sophomore and junior year of college, I was not able to find a job because of all of the layoffs, et cetera. And so my brother was a homicide detective in Washington, D.C., and suggested that I apply to the VA. He had heard that the VA was hiring people. And so I worked in sterile supplies, about 3 floors underground, sterilizing instruments for the operating room.
Well.
And at the end of the summer, the supervisor came to me and said the Georgetown medical students were going home for the summer, and would I consider volunteering for a couple of weeks to hold retractors for the surgeons, and that I could perhaps meet real surgeons and meet real patients and things like that.
And you were in med school at this time?
No.
Okay.
I was an undergraduate.
Yeah.
I mean, other than seeing a pediatrician once or twice in my life, I mean, I had no contact with medicine whatsoever. And I walked in the operating room that very first day and said, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life.
Wow. That's incredible. What do you think about it? What was it that did that to you, do you think?
I don't know. It was like you're able to fix a problem and make a patient better.
Yeah.
And that I could relate to. And, and it was, I've always said I've had a very charmed life in the sense that, different people entered my life. This supervisor is one of them. And, made a very important tack in my life and then exited my life. Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about my parents or,
sure.
Certain teachers or role models, et cetera, but just people who temporarily entered my life and then exited. And so that was pretty amazing that, that made me say, oh, well, I really want to go to medical school. And so the next part in the journey was I was trying to graduate with departmental honors as an undergraduate, and none of the biology faculty would take me on to work in the lab. You had to do an independent lab project. And because I was interested in going to medical school. And so they said I should contact somebody in the medical school, and I obviously knew no one. And so I called a person who was very, very famous, who was, as it turns out, pretty curmudgeonly. And I could appreciate, you would appreciate this, that, somebody calls your office,
mm-hmm.
like every hour on the hour, hoping to get an appointment with you, and you say, like, geez, who is this person?
Yeah.
And after about the 500th phone call, I'm sure his assistant went in and said, listen, if you don't get this kid off
I'm tired of talking to him. Persistency wins.
And he answered the phone and said, look, I'm too busy to deal with undergraduate students, and quit bothering my secretary, and slammed the phone down.
Mm.
And of course, he was on the admissions committee of the medical school. So you can imagine that, my life sort of appeared before me. But then there was an advisor to an honorary fraternity I was in, pre-med fraternity. Again, person I'd never met. And I went up naively to say, gee, could you talk to this curmudgeonly colleague of yours
mm-hmm.
and ask him if I could work for him in the lab? And he said, geez, why don't you work for me? And the rest is history.
Wow. That's amazing. Think about those little choices, though. You talk about, they wanted you to volunteer, right? And then that changed your whole life trajectory. So I think young professionals, or even, I've got a son in college, right? These little choices you make, you never know how that's going to change your life, right?
Well, you always have to be prepared. People enter your life and provide you opportunities, and you never know where those opportunities will lead.
That's right.
And I certainly didn't have the parents that had the experience to say, oh, well, gee, pick route A as opposed to route B.
Yeah.
Because that would be a better option for you, or a less risky option, or what have you.
Yeah.
I was, sort of dependent on outside individuals giving me some advice and trying to listen to the advice.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Siteman Cancer Center for a little bit. So like I just said earlier, 25 years this past November. You are a very humble guy, but I'm going to ask you to not be humble. I'm going to ask you to brag about Siteman Cancer Center. Tell us a little bit about it, why we're so lucky to have Siteman here in St. Louis.
Well, it's interesting. Washington University, Barnes-Jewish Hospital, BJC, did not have an integrated, organized cancer program. When I was first recruited to WashU to be the chair of surgery. And so I was given the opportunity by the dean and the president of the hospital to help organize a cancer program. I had come from the Dana-Farber and Brigham and Mass General in Boston, so I sort of had a pretty good idea of, what things worked and what things were not working as well, etc. And that certainly helped. And when we first birthed the center, we had two major goals. One is we decided that we would want to be experts in every kind of cancer. Now, if you think about that again, that was a little bit naive on our part that, gee, we could find experts in every kind of cancer, but we have now done that 25 years later. And the second goal was that we wanted every single patient to feel that they were a member of our immediate family and that they were the only patient we cared for that year. So they were special. And again, I hear that all the time from patients. It's, not just the expertise and compassion of the people like their physicians who take care of them, but the people who are the receptionists and the medical assistants and nurses and, pharmacists and other kinds of individuals. That culture exists at Siteman, and it's truly unique.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we're very, very proud of.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier, the people, right? It's the people you surround yourself with. So I'm sitting here with the guy that literally, Gretchen, I meant to say hi to you earlier too. Hello, Gretchen. But we're with the guy that built it from the ground up. Is that fair to say? Which I think is really cool. And but you talked about the people you surround yourself with. That's what makes it work. How did you, as a leader, along with others, I know, but you specifically, find the experts to get us here 25 years later? How do you go about that?
Well, I think first you have to have a vision. And, what do you want to build? And again, we didn't want to build a cancer center. We wanted to build a cancer center that would be the leader nationally and internationally, that it would be a destination place. So the North Star, Al Siteman, when he named the center, asked the question, well, why are my business colleagues going to Houston or Rochester, Minnesota, or Chicago or New York or someplace? Why don't they stay here in St. Louis?
Yeah.
And better, why not have people from Boston or California come to St. Louis because of the expertise? And now, 25 years later, that's exactly what happens. We have people from all 50 states who come to St. Louis because of the expertise and because of the compassionate care that we provide. So that vision, we want to be the best that there is.
Yeah.
And then you got to have a plan. What's your plan for trying to get where you want to go? Frequently when I interview candidates for jobs, I say, well, close your eyes and tell me where you want to be in 10 years. And I don't mean geographically in the sense of, I want to be in California or New York or wherever. I'm talking about, I want to run my own advisement firm, and I want to have a group of people who work for me, and I want to have a whole bunch of clients. Well, then it becomes pretty easy to extrapolate back and say, all right, well, now how do I do that? You see, what kind of background in education do I need to be able to provide that kind of expert advice? How do I, as I start to grow clients, well, then how do I hire other individuals so that, again, people don't have to wait, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And so it was a way of us building out this cancer program. How did we attract people who bought into this vision and were expert in all these different kinds of cancers? And again, with each specialty. So we needed surgeons, we needed radiation oncologists, we needed medical oncologists, but we also needed scientists who were going to keep doing the innovation, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's been, what has made it so much fun to build Siteman Cancer Center.
Well, you have done an amazing job with the team that you've got. And I love that you started with the vision, and hence the name of our firm, Visionary Wealth Advisors, right? And so it's what the future could or will be like. And I think, to your point, once we know that, and we've all heard the saying, once we know your why, anyhow is possible, things like that, right? And I think for our clients and for the community, I think that's where it starts. I mean, I couldn't agree more that your vision matters. And when there's clarity there, and then you go put the plan and you show up every day and be boringly consistent and do it, that's when greatness can happen, and that's exactly what you've done. That's amazing.
I think having a plan and recognizing that it takes a lot of persistence, and it takes a lot of perspiration.
Yeah. It takes those 500 phone calls.
It's very easy. It's easy to look at somebody who's successful and say, oh my, well, gee, he was born or she was born successful.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that behind the scenes, you had to make 500 phone calls and make 500 pitches to various clients and to colleagues who had expertise in areas that perhaps you didn't have specific expertise in.
That's right.
But that's how you build out your company. And it was the same way with Siteman. We looked at people and said, gee, we need somebody to fill this role, and went after experts, and we home grew a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of mentoring, and so 2/3 of the leadership of our cancer center came as a junior person, and we mentored them over the course of years in order to be able to get them where they are.
Yeah, love it. How has cancer treatments evolved in the recent years? So when you think about, again, where we came from 25 years ago, how has it evolved, and where do you see it going over the next, say, 5 years?
It's a really great question. I always say, when I look back on medical school, we were lumpers. In other words, what we tried to do was take everybody with a certain type of cancer and lump them together and then try to treat them the same way. Might be a radical surgical operation, it might be chemotherapy, etc. Today, we've realized through genomics that, for example, there's 16 different kinds of lymphoma. And while they may get chemotherapy, they get different kinds of chemotherapy. And so you don't treat a mantle cell lymphoma the same way you treat a B-cell lymphoma, et cetera, with the same medications. And so
sorry to interrupt, but so my dad had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2007. So that, back in 2007, is going to be completely different than what you'd be doing today in 2025.
Yeah, I was in a transition back in 2007. So we were on the journey to where we are today. And today, we're able to look at genes and biomarkers and predict response to various treatments and develop a personal cocktail of chemotherapy, immune therapies, etc., for our patients, which is very different than the local St. Elsewhere Cancer Center, which obviously just doesn't have that expertise.
Yeah, that's another huge deal for St. Louis. Talk about some of the stories that you can share, like resilience, breakthroughs, that make you kind of pinch yourself and say, wow, like we're a part of that. We're doing that. You got any stories that you can share on that?
Well, it's interesting. When you had asked earlier about how I actually got into oncology, so I mentioned about how I thought I wanted to be a surgeon, and during my internship in Boston, first rotation happened to be surgical oncology, and it happened to have a leader who was this charismatic, sort of early as a concierge doctor, who gave out his home phone number. This is, of course, before cell phones. Gave out his home phone number to patients, and he would be the first person in the emergency room if you twisted your ankle, even though it had nothing to do with your cancer. So as you'd imagine, his patients loved him. And he was a great role model, mentor, but to me, surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy did not seem like that was going to cure everybody's cancer. And so I developed an interest in immune therapy from the perspective that if we took my kidney and engrafted it into you, your body, because we're not identical twins, would reject my kidney. And the mechanism that your body would reject my kidney and destroy the organ is through the immune system. So if your body has the capability of destroying an organ, well then why wouldn't it have the capability to destroy a cancer? And the problem is that cancers are ironically very similar to normal, and they suppress the immune system. And so over the years we've learned how to turn on the immune system and control the immune system so that it can attack cancers.
So it's your own body doing it, really.
Correct. And so, for example, we have now personalized vaccines, work only in one patient, where we sequence their cancer, look at the antigens that might elicit the best immune response, develop a cocktail, and create a vaccination which turns on the immune system. Yeah. And we've seen phenomenal response in breast cancer and pancreas cancer. So again, this was 30 or 40 years of research that culminated in us being able to do these very, very innovative Star Wars-like interventions that we would have thought even 20 years ago were impossible. They're now reality. And it's those kinds of approaches that make Siteman stand apart from your neighborhood cancer center that has wonderful physicians, very caring physicians, and beautiful facilities, but they don't have the innovation, they don't have that state-of-the-art intervention that a place like Siteman has.
Yeah. What about AI? What do you see, what role is that going to be playing in cancer?
Well, to me, AI, we're already using AI. So, for example, we have a project. One of the common problems evaluating a woman who has a mammogram is to say, well, gee, there's a little shadow on the mammogram. Is that likely a breast cancer, or is it just a variation in normal? In using AI, we can integrate the very first mammogram that patient had and all the subsequent mammograms to predict, is this area likely to be cancer? Would it justify the intervention, for example, of a biopsy? Or might we be able to look at it and say, gee, this is just a variation in normal and does not need an intervention? Same way with pathology, pathology slides. How do we predict what is invasive cancer and early non-invasive cancer, etc.? And so, again, AI is playing a role. So there's two practical areas where today we are applying AI methodology, but we're trying to purposely control the AI for our benefit and our patients' benefit.
Which gets smarter as time goes on, right? It grows with you. How much human interaction is there with that?
We still have a radiologist who evaluates the mammogram and integrates this information. We still have a pathologist who evaluates and signs out the pathology, but utilizes AI to evaluate hundreds and hundreds of slides, which, as you would imagine, can be done much more rapidly and in many ways much more accurately than a human being sort of flipping slides, et cetera, et cetera.
That's crazy.
And so, those are two areas. I think a third area is in designing drugs. Most of the pharmaceutical industry talks about, 1 in 100 being successful in a patient. But, using AI, we probably will be able to increase the success rate into the 40 or 50% range.
Wow.
And so, again, it's learning how to control AI and learning how to apply it correctly will help us, and again, accelerate the pace of discovery and innovation and new technology.
So I think as leaders, I always talk about we're the ultimate having to master the moment of decision, right? You get paid to make decisions, and they're big decisions. And I've heard you say in the past is it may be best to say here's one way, here's another way, but here's a third way, and that one doesn't work, and here's why, and here's what we're going to do. So that moment of decision making that you have to master, what is it you're most proud of when you look at your career, some of those big moments that you had to make a big decision?
Well, I think if you think of, for example, Siteman Cancer Center, realize that, having this vision of a world-class cancer center here in St. Louis, what would that impact be on St. Louis? Clearly, first, second, and third are our patients.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. I always say, gee, if the patients weren't here, none of us would be here. So that's top for sure. But what's the economic impact on St. Louis? Here we have $250 million a year of research grants and clinical trials, et cetera. And that employs a lot of individuals. Obviously, this year we'll care for over 75,000 unique patients. That employs a lot of people. Our research has created 23 companies in the last 5 years. And so, again, it's an opportunity for us to have a much larger impact in this entire region. And so it's been fun to watch that grow. And, from a very, very modest beginning 25 years ago to currently, where, for example, we just opened September 30th our new Gary C. Wirtz ambulatory building of Siteman. We consolidated all of our outpatient intervention care. So every time you go see a physician downtown, not at one of our satellites, that it would be at the Gary Wirtz building. It's got infusion bays, etc. We spent a long time listening to patients, listening to family members. What would you like? Yeah. What would make you feel more comfortable and supported and provide more hope to you? And it's a gorgeous building, and I think our patients love it. It's much more convenient for patients. We've created it so they have fewer appointments because we cohabitate experts at the same time. And so I think it's been very, very well received by our patients.
Yeah. Talk about the front of the building. I know that's kind of an unknown fact that maybe the common person like myself driving by doesn't even, pay attention to what that is.
That was one of the fun parts of, when you're designing the building. So it has 3 floors of parking, 433 spaces, and the spaces are only for patients. So none of the staff, none of the physicians get to park in the building. And on each of the floors for parking, you can pull up to the elevator bay. You're literally within 10 feet of the elevator. So if the patient is elderly, if the patient is not feeling well, it facilitates them getting into the facility, etc. 80% of our patients will stay on one floor. And so it's not running different places and different buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Everything's consolidated. And I think the other thing that is really nice is that there's a lot of natural light. It's pleasant. The artwork is all real. We asked 18 local artists to coordinate their effort, and so all of the artwork in the building is original artwork, and each of the floors are color-coded, so again, it makes it easy for the patient. And so again, we've sort of taken what we've learned in the previous years, doubled down on how do we make it more efficient, more supportive, better for our patients, and and we're still looking at ways that we're going to be able to improve that.
And I think, though, isn't the front of the building like a gene mutation or something? What is it?
Yeah, so as we, where the parking is, you can't have solid wall on the outside because of the fumes from the automobiles. And so we were talking back and forth about, well, what kind of a covering would we want to put on the outside skin of the 3 floors of parking? And we decided that one of the areas would be, how about if we designed a DNA helix, which is in our logo. And so the architect designed that, and so if you look carefully at the front of the building, you'll see a DNA helix. And
I like it.
So it still allows for air to pass through, et cetera, but
How do you personally navigate the pressure of, all the jobs? I was told you over the year, you got 4 full-time jobs basically, right? And you still have a family. And how have you personally navigated through that? I don't like balance because I don't think there's a lot of balance in life when you're busy and doing the things you're doing. But how have you navigated all that?
Well, I think one of the things that is really important, I always say you have to have a partner. Now, for some of us, that partner is a physical person. In your case, it's your wife.
Yep.
In my case, it's my wife. Now, my wife doesn't work for Siteman Cancer Center, although she has done thousands of events for Siteman Cancer Center. And she's raised money for Siteman Cancer Center, et cetera. But my wife is very knowledgeable about the arts. She's currently the chair of Opera Theater St. Louis's board. And so I get to meet world-renowned individuals in the opera and music and other fields that I would never come across as a director of a cancer center. And invariably people walk up to me and say, "Gee, I know you. You're Kim Eberlein's husband, aren't you?"
That's great. You're like, "Well, yes, I am."
And so that's you get to do these things that are completely different from what you do in your day job, and you meet these really world-class individuals. I come away with an appreciation for you to be an opera star. The pyramid is so steep and so difficult to get to the top level of performance that I come away with a newfound invigoration to realize that, gee, what I'm doing is maybe difficult, but it's nowhere near as difficult as becoming a top performer or to be the principal of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. Those are really tough roles to play.
Don't you think you can study those people though and learn? Like I like to do that, right? Whether I'm watching a guy like you or a top sport person, athlete, or somebody in opera. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there between anything you do and to be at the top of your game. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah.
And well, again, I think people have to have a passion for what they're doing. They have to have a vision of, gee, what do I want to be? Yep. And do I want to be a singer, top, sing at the Metropolitan Opera and at opera houses around the world? Or do I want to sing in a chorus? I mean, and maybe have some other job and do that. And so, again, I think your vision and what you want to do and the passion, I think of somebody like Renee Fleming, clearly one of the superstars of the opera world. And people had asked her, well, how did you make it? And it was really this drive, this passion for excelling, and the persistence of, she would audition for a role and she was the second, or she might be the backup, but she kept with it and kept working at it and then became a superstar.
Yeah.
But it was really that persistence and that, drive that just, look, I'm just going to keep making myself better and better and better. Well,
talking about making yourself better and better and better, like I love talking about morning routines or habits that people have. So do you have something you would consider like your morning routine to get up, to get your head going the right way so you can go conquer the world at Siteman Cancer Center?
Yeah, I like to get up early, and I usually read part of the newspaper.
Yep.
I'll do email. I'll sort of think about, gee, what do I have on the agenda for today, and who am I going to see, or who am I recruiting, or what am I trying to accomplish with various things. It sort of helps me, and I've done that all my life. Even when I was back doing surgery, I'd wake up and I'd be thinking, all right, I'm going to be doing a liver resection today, or a pancreatectomy, or what have you. And how am I going to do this operation? What do I think may be pitfalls? And how do I avoid those?
Yeah.
And so the patient will have a better outcome.
Yeah.
And so, it's planning, thinking ahead and anticipating, okay, well, if this were to happen, how would I react? And so it becomes more second nature. Yeah. And so I was always very proud that patients that I performed surgery had good outcomes.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked the questions. I love that answer, because for me, I do a Sunday night planning for the week, and I write down, everything's technology, right? Your computer, your phones, but I physically write down every single thing I have on my calendar all week long. And then it's sit there and then go through one by one, right? So I physically knew I was sitting in this chair on Sunday, right? 3 days ago, I was thinking about this podcast or this client meeting I had. And I think that's the power of visualization that helps make you successful. Agree?
I think it helps just in terms of planning what you want to do. What is it that you're going to try to accomplish? If you have this particular meeting with an individual, it might be a client, it might be somebody you're recruiting, it might be one of the leaders of the institution. Well, what's the goal of the meeting? And if the person doesn't agree with your point of view, how are you going to react to that, and what are you going to present as an alternative to be able to constructively solve the problem? And so I think that's very, very helpful. You've already done a dry run.
Yeah. So last few questions here. Talk to us about, you talked about $250 million of grants, and this was really, really helpful for Julie and I a number of years ago, probably 10 plus years ago, to hear from you and your team. It's like, okay, you hear $250 million, and the man or woman driving down the road right now probably is like, what can I really do to impact that number? It's such a big number. And you talked about even like what a $10,000. So if Swing for Hope can give $10,000 to somebody at Siteman Cancer Center, talk about what that $10,000 does and what it can turn into. So the normal folks like ourselves say, hey, that $1,000 that I'm giving to that charity is a really big deal, and here's why.
So the $250 million is a culmination of many years of work, oftentimes, to write a grant to the National Cancer Institute, the NIH, to pharmaceutical companies to support a clinical trial, etc. As you would imagine, our investigators come up with new ideas all the time. Well, gee, would this treatment be a better treatment, less toxic for our patients? And as you'd imagine, we have to go through a process of, finding proof of principle preliminary data. And so the $10,000 from, a golf tournament like you and Julie run every year can provide that carefully invested seed funding. So we have a program called Siteman Investment Program, SIP. And it goes through multiple layers of peer review. So we don't just hand out money.
Sure.
Oh, Brett, you have a great idea here. Here's some money. Come back to us when you get some data. We vet these ideas, and we have a very multidisciplinary senior leadership. They're experts in all facets of cancer research and clinical care, etc. They vet these ideas, and if we think that they're valid, then we have the person submit a grant to a peer review committee, blinded, and then with the results of the peer review, then the senior leadership makes a decision. Is it worthy to put our investment? Over the years, we've gotten a 15-to-1 return on investment, which is pretty amazing. And why? Because our investigators have been pushed by our senior leadership, by the peer review, to think through strategically what are the ways that this project or this new technology or this new treatment for patients is going to be successful. And so when they then write a grant to the National Cancer Institute, they already have preliminary data, they already have proof of principle, and they already have an outline, a template of what likely is going to be success. And so they've been highly successful at getting grants. And, philanthropy is not going to be, these projects take tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to come to fruition. So philanthropy can't do that very easily, but they can provide this initial seed funding. And if we carefully deploy it as the leadership of the Cancer Center, then it can change paradigms of treatment.
Yep.
It can reduce toxicity. It can improve the outcomes of our patients. And that's what Siteman Cancer Center is known for by our peers around the country, is the impact of the innovation in different treatments that we have initiated here at Siteman, which have now become standard of practice in other cancer centers around the country.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's the big deal for people that are, again, coming to events like Swing for Hope and all the other great stuff that's out there in the St. Louis area. But that $100 donation, that $1,000 donation, it all adds up, and that's what makes the impact to get the stuff going, to get the big ones. So
in the last 5 years, we've invested a little over $30 million in these projects. Mm-hmm. And they have created over $450 million of grants. And so it accelerates the pace of discovery. It accelerates the pace of new interventions, new clinical trials, etc. And that helps our patients, provides more hope to our patients. So
how do people get involved? There's a man or woman listening to this right now. They've either been impacted by cancer themselves or a family member or friend. We've all been that way. And how do they get involved now with Siteman?
Well, we're always looking for volunteers. We have many people like you and your wife who have put on a golf tournament, for example, recognizing just how much work that is. You know what I mean? Raising 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever the number is it minimizes the amount of work and passion that one has to have for that.
Yeah.
But we have all kinds of projects that people raise, from selling lemonade and T-shirts to having golf tournaments and et cetera, et cetera. And all of these we put into this, Siteman investment program. We invest in these new ideas, and we do it really like a venture capital. We vet these ideas. We fund probably less than 10%. So, we don't
not everybody's getting the check.
Yeah, not everybody gets the check. I mean, they have to reach a certain level of expertise and likelihood of success that is vetted by our senior leadership. And I think that's the secret sauce.
Great. Or you can go to swingforhope.org and help Julie and I with our mission and our, with you guys. We've been together since, 2007, 2008, something like that. So it's been a long time.
Absolutely.
And we're very blessed to have you all. And where's the next golf trip? Where are you going?
Gee, I don't know. I'll have to ask you.
Okay. We'll get some golf on the calendar.
I have to say, you talked earlier about, what do you do outside of work? And, and you're probably the same way. You get on the first tee box on any golf course anywhere in the world, and all you're thinking about is, where am I going to put this
all other thinking goes out there.
And everything else sort of, it clears your mind.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a very good golfer, but boy, I love being on a golf course, the beauty and the opportunity to, play golf, et cetera, et cetera. And fortunately, I have enough good shots that, it makes me come back the next day.
That's right. It may be that last putt on 18, but man, it's going to bring you back. And that's why my wife was not a golfer, is still not, but I had to, educate her on why it was so important, for business, and why I needed to go play some golf. But it's awesome. It's great. I love doing it with people from work. And even if you're trying to recruit somebody, it's great to be out on a golf course with them, because you can learn a lot about somebody's character in that 4-hour round of golf.
Correct. Yeah.
So, well, Dr. Timothy Eberlein, thank you so much. And Gretchen, thank you so much for getting him over here and for you being on the circuit of success. Love having you, and continue making the impact that you're making.
Well, good. Thank you very much, Brett, and thanks for everything you and Julie do for Siteman Cancer Center.
Absolutely.